All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to demystify the notoriously complex and, let's be honest, wildly varied finales of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Because look, if you've ever found yourself just staring blankly at the screen as the credits roll on this absolute masterpiece, wondering what on earth you just watched, well, I can promise you, you are in the perfect place. Today, we're unpacking the psychological depths, the cryptic lore, and the really fascinating evolution of how this story wraps up, stretching all the way from the mid-90s to its ultimate resolution today. So if you finished this landmark series and felt totally, entirely lost by the end, you are definitely not alone. It's almost a rite of passage. You see, for the first half, Evangelion feels like a standard, albeit incredibly brilliant, Monster of the Week mecha action show. But then, it completely shifts gears. It literally pulls the rug right out from under us, evolving into this incredibly dense, surreal exploration of human psychology. It just abandons traditional narrative structure right at the finish line, swapping out those giant robot battles for deep, internal philosophical monologues. It is a massive, jarring tonal shift, and it leaves almost every first-time viewer scratching their heads. To make sense of all this chaos, we're taking a lore-first approach today. We're going to cover the most confusing ending. What is instrumentality? The TV anime's ending, End of Evangelion Explained, the meaning of disgusting, and finally, finding a happy ending. Let's get right to it. Okay, starting with Section 1, the most confusing ending. Let's look at what makes this original narrative so famously abstract, deeply personal, and highly controversial. You really cannot separate the art of Evangelion from the artist who made it. It is fascinating how a brutally punishing production schedule, combined with creator Hideaki Anno's own severe mental health struggles, directly transformed a sci-fi epic into a raw psychological breakdown. As the deadline for the original TV series loomed, time and budget literally just ran out. But rather than compromising and churning out some standard, run-of-the-mill ending, Anno essentially laid his own soul bare. He turned our protagonist, Shinji Ikari, into a direct avatar for his own neuroses, fears, and battles with clinical depression. Critics have actually drawn parallels between Anno and provocative directors like Lars von Trier, because both have used profound, deeply personal pain to fuel art that completely captivates, heavily divides, and sometimes really infuriates people. Moving to Section 2, what is instrumentality? Before we can actually understand the endings, we have to grasp the core philosophical concept driving the entire plot. The Human Instrumentality Project. It's defined as a process where all human souls merge into one single existence, completely eliminating individuality to erase pain, fear, and loneliness. So the crucial takeaway here is that the grand apocalypse in this show, it's actually a massive metaphor for forced human connection, the ultimate escape from emotional suffering. It's built on the idea that humans are inherently flawed and incomplete simply because we're separated by physical bodies and emotional walls. The plan is to forcefully break down those walls and melt everyone into one shared consciousness. I mean, imagine being dissolved into a literal primordial soup. The pitch is that nobody would ever have to feel the sting of rejection, the terror of misunderstanding, or the ache of loneliness ever again. It's a terrifying yet strangely appealing, completely reclusive plan for humanity. And what's wild is the conflicting motives behind this apocalypse. On one hand, you have the shadow organization known as SEAL. They view instrumentality as a grand religious ritual. Their goal is to discard the incomplete species of humanity for a forced evolution into godhood. They want spiritual atonement for the entire world. But on the exact opposite side, you have Commander Gendo Ikari, Shinji's notoriously cold-hearted father. Gendo doesn't care about evolving humanity at all. His motive is intensely, selfishly personal. He just wants to use this cosmic reset button for one thing, to reunite with his deceased wife, Yui. He is quite literally willing to sacrifice the entire world and everyone in it, just to cure his own isolating, unbearable grief. Now, when you translate the show's heavy sci-fi jargon into psychological metaphors, the notoriously confusing lore suddenly becomes incredibly accessible. It's deeply human. For example, the AT field isn't just some generic sci-fi force field shielding a monster. It literally represents the wall of the human heart, the emotional barriers that separate individuals and keep other people out. The LCL fluid isn't just a weird, breathable orange liquid inside the robot's cockpit. It represents that primordial soup, a physical manifestation of a world without boundaries or loneliness. And the Evangelions themselves, they're just vessels used to control fate and confront deep-seated trauma. Once you realize the show uses giant robots and apocalyptic imagery to talk about the very real fear of intimacy, well, the entire narrative just unlocks. Which brings us to Section 3,
the TV anime's ending. Let's see how all of this builds into the original 1995 television finale. When it was finally time to show this grand apocalypse back in 95, the creators took a massive, totally unprecedented left turn. Rather than showing the physical destruction of the planet, the TV ending acts as a psychological therapy session for Shinji, taking place entirely inside his head. In episodes 25 and 26, the real world just fades away. We're plunged directly into Shinji's consciousness as human instrumentality actually takes effect. Remember how we said the animation budget was completely tapped out? Well, that led to some surreal experimental scenes that were sometimes literally just rough pencil line drawings. Within this, we see Shinji explore an alternate slice-of-life reality, where he's just a normal kid in a high school comedy, basically, proving to himself that his life doesn't have to be miserable. And while the physical fate of the world is left incredibly vague, and his co-pilot Asuka is left physically comatose out in the real world, the TV show actually concludes on a metaphysical but remarkably upbeat note of self-acceptance. Shinji decides that he is worthy of existing. Then, the entire cast surrounds him to literally applaud his psychological breakthrough, shouting, "Congratulations." It's bizarre, but it's become one of anime's most enduring cultural moments.
Now on to Section 4, End of Evangelion Explained. Unsurprisingly, there was severe fan confusion and intense backlash to that internal TV resolution. Fans wanted to see what actually happened to the physical world. So Hideaki Anno delivered it in 1997 in the most devastating way possible with the End of Evangelion film. This movie offered a literal, visually explosive interpretation of instrumentality. We actually see the horrifying physical reality of the Third Impact destroying the world. The military violently invades headquarters. Asuka pushes herself out of her coma and goes down swinging in this desperate, deeply visceral, and ultimately doomed battle against the monstrous mass production EVAs. Meanwhile, humanity's souls are forcefully merged into a glowing red sea of LCL fluid. Above it all, a giant ray merges with the ancient being Lilith, becoming this godlike entity who essentially hands the keys to the universe over to a severely traumatized, emotionally shattered Shinji. It is entirely up to him to decide the ultimate fate of humanity. And Shinji is faced with an impossible choice. He actively experiences instrumentality. He feels what it's like to accept it, to embrace a completely safe, unified existence devoid of any rejection, but at the cost of losing all personal identity. But ultimately, Shinji realizes that a world without pain is also a world without real connection. Without the pain of separation, there is no joy in finding someone. So he chooses to reject that false peace. He chooses to restore the boundaries between humans, bringing back individuality despite the inevitable pain it brings. He lets the AT fields exist again, knowing full well that living means getting hurt. That choice leads us directly to Section 5, the meaning of disgusting. This brings us right to the climax of the film and easily one of the most heavily debated mystery boxes in anime history. Right after Shinji chooses individuality, he wakes up on a desolate beach in a destroyed world. Asuka is lying right next to him. To test if reality has truly returned, to see if boundaries actually exist again, he reaches out and begins choking her. But she doesn't fight back. Instead, she gently touches his face. He breaks down crying. And rather than comforting him, she simply looks up and says, "How disgusting." And then, the movie just abruptly ends. No way, right? Fans have debated this specific Japanese phrase, kimochi warui, for decades. The theories are absolutely wild. Some point to a long-debunked rumor from the original English dub studio claiming it was a reference to morning sickness. Others say it's her absolute physical disgust at Shinji's incredibly inappropriate behavior toward her earlier in the film while she was comatose. But on a deeper, thematic level, it's widely viewed as a vocal rejection of the Human Instrumentality Project itself. It represents the sickening, nauseating reality of returning to a human body with emotional boundaries. By insulting him, she is asserting her individuality. She's proving they are separate people again. It perfectly captures the messy, painful reality of human nature that they both just chose to return to. Fortunately for all of us seeking a true sense of closure, we arrive at Section 6, finding a happy ending. Because the franchise didn't just end on that incredibly bleak beach in 97. Tracing the releases over the decades, we can actually see a clear thematic evolution that reflects Anno's own healing, moving away from deep trauma and toward genuine hope.
We started with that metaphysical TV journey in 95 and the dark spectacle of the film in 97. But then, in the 2013 manga adaptation, we get a literal reset. Shinji chooses to undo the apocalypse entirely, creating a normal, peaceful world before the second impact ever happened. Giant robots never ruined his life. And finally, the massive Rebuild of Evangelion film series, which wrapped up in 2021, takes this even further. Through some stunning meta-commentary, Shinji literally rewrites the universe to exist without Evangelions. He grows up, he makes peace with his father, and he steps out of the animated world into a bright, live-action future. It is a beautiful, definitive farewell, proving that even the deepest psychological trauma can eventually be overcome. Ultimately, the true brilliance of Evangelion is that it forces every single viewer to answer a profound question for themselves. Everything we've covered today, the lore, the alternate endings, the confusing psychological dialogue, it all strips away to one core concept. This explainer isn't really about giant robots fighting aliens, it's about the terrifying, messy, beautiful reality of letting someone else into your heart. So, looking at the incredible, decades-long journey of Shinji Ikari, ask yourself, will you live with others, even if it means getting hurt, or escape to a world without pain?